Thanks for joining us. I'm Sarah Freemark, and over the next half hour, we'll follow a group of African lions from the dank corners of isolation to temporary reprieve in Muskoka, 3 hours north of Toronto. Finally, for some, a several thousand-kilometer journey across an international border to their forever homes. More than that, we'll share what advocates say needs to change. This is our investigative series, Eyes in the Darkness, the hidden cost of roadside zoos. You head out for the day with your family to look at some animals at what seems like a small zoo. But what happens behind the closed doors at what's known as a roadside zoo? Unimaginable.
What we see in those facilities stays with you forever.
Rebecca Aldworth and Humane World for Animals Canada are no stranger to this Quebec-based facility. The team spearheaded the largest seizure of zoo animals in Canadian history 6 years ago.
This is without a doubt the most complex animal rescue we've ever undertaken in Canada. As of today, Humane Society International is assuming the care of more than 100 wild and exotic animals comprising dozens of different species.
It ended up being more than 250 animals that were seized. The owner, Norman Chahan, had received fines from the province in the past and was on the radar of the Montreal SPCA.
We did seize 2 live alpacas who were emaciated and at imminent risk of death, according to the veterinarian, as well as 4 deceased animals, 2 tigers and 2 species of birds.
Then a year later at St. Edouard Zoo.
This is the first time in Canada that a zoo owner is facing criminal animal cruelty charges.
The veterinarian who was accompanying us, who has had over 15 years of experience working with both professional and amateur zoological facilities, she told us that this was by far the worst case she had ever seen in her whole career.
But the federal charge of animal cruelty dropped after Chahan pleaded guilty to lesser violations. He was fined $6,800 and banned from owning exotic animals for 5 years.
3 lemurs who suffered such severe frostbite that their fingers fell off, and the owner refused to treat them or have them euthanized because he could still breed them.
Fast forward to January of 2025. Another for-profit roadside zoo operating on the same property went bankrupt, and the land deferred back to Chahan, along with these 7 lions.
It was devastating for us to have gone in the first time, to have committed the just massive resources, both human and financial, it took to shut that roadside zoo down and to find homes, forever homes for these animals throughout North America. And to know that he just circumvented everything that had happened.
Animal law advocacy organization Animal Justice states that Canada has some of the worst animal protection laws in the developed world.
When I walked into that broken down, dank, barren, dark enclosure that these lions were in, and I saw them confined to tiny spaces, and that's where they were spending their winter, in, an 8x10 chain link surrounded concrete room with nothing. They were just alone in the dark and waiting for help. I walked in there and I saw that, and I knew there was no way that we could walk away. It came to light that the owner of this facility was considering euthanizing the lions and or selling them to a known animal abuser in the United States.
And it didn't take long for word to catch wind south of the border, all the way to Minnesota.
There was somebody in the U.S. looking to purchase these lions. And that's how we got involved, because we obviously didn't want them to go to one concerning situation to another. We wanted them to be able to live out their lives at accredited sanctuaries and no longer contribute to the surplus, which we call the captive wildlife crisis.
There we go, beautiful. Yep, all good.
When you're transporting an endangered animal, you have to obtain a permit to do so. But that permit goes through multiple government processes, and it's time intensive to get. So that's why we had to have a temporary home in Canada while we waited for those permits.
Maybe another hand? Hold on, sit.
That home didn't exist in Canada. There were no zoos that were able to take these animals even temporarily. There was no space for them anywhere. So we had to construct a facility from the ground up, and that's where Aspen Valley came in.
And the clock was ticking. It was the dead of winter, 3 hours north of Toronto, and the Muskoka-based nonprofit needed to build an entirely new space to become the first of its kind sanctuary in Canada to bring these innocent animals one step closer to salvation. But the painful journey far from over, and the greater issue still unaddressed.
Girl, good girl.
For these 7 lions, the long journey from a dilapidated Quebec roadside zoo to a new life spans across the U.S. border, involves 3 sanctuaries and a global nonprofit dedicated to animal welfare.
Humane World actually contacted us about a roadside zoo. It had previously been shut down. Somehow animals were acquired again, and the lions all needed to be confiscated. So we partnered with Humane World, another animal sanctuary in the U.S. called the Wild Cat Sanctuary in Minnesota, and then Aspen Valley Wildlife Sanctuary in Ontario.
But Aspen Valley, a Muskoka-based nonprofit sanctuary, didn't have an appropriate space for animals this size, so the construction began.
3 enclosures, 1, 2, and the third one down there. You see there's still a lot happening here.
This is an operation that was going to take hundreds of thousands of dollars to execute from beginning to end. And so we needed to find really great partners. And to me, it's a really good example of what can happen when everyone works together to make the impossible possible.
When we found out about this rescue, it wasn't until the end of January, and we had a very tight timeline to have all of this done by the end of April. And that was because that was the deadline that was set by the owner of the Roadside Zoo, where he wanted all of the animals gone by the end of April. If not, unfortunately, their fate would have been euthanasia.
The lions may have narrowly escaped death, but the way they were forced to live took a toll.
They were extremely overweight, which is just as bad as finding a starving animal. But at the same time, we're talking about lots of snow, harsh winters. These are African lions, so they were locked inside of a very small building.
But the team from Turpentine Wildlife Sanctuary in Arkansas was there to help.
The rescue team that came was not only their animal caregivers that are very used to dealing with large cats, that's what they specialize in, but they also brought their veterinarians with them. So this was a very carefully, well thought out transport.
It was a big ask for this facility and the staff and volunteers to put this extra workload on, but everybody loved these lions right from the beginning. We couldn't imagine their fate of being euthanized if we didn't do this. And now we are basically the only wildlife rehab facility in Canada that is accredited for from the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries.
The posts are permanently in the ground. It's of chain link, and so it's weather resistant. And we were building this not only just with the lions in mind, but also this is going to be a rescue center for many, many years to come.
When you look at the work that the people at Aspen Valley do each and every day to give these animals a new life and a second chance, it's so incredible.
Aspen Valley has, wow, you guys should be really proud to have such a wonderful sanctuary right there in Ontario. They help over 1,000 animals a year rehab. Humane World helped them build these enclosures, pay for the construction, but these people not only have been doing their regular rescue and rehabilitation, but took on all of these lions while we and the other accredited sanctuary worked on the CITES paperwork in order to get those lions to sanctuary and forever homes.
Paperwork that would allow the African lions to travel to Arkansas and Minnesota.
We wanted them to be able to live out their lives at accredited sanctuaries and no longer contribute to the surplus, which we call the captive wildlife crisis.
The sad reality is that there's a lot of animals that are in captivity that are not in the best situations or in the best environments, and we know for sure there's going to be other animals that are going to have to be rescued in the future.
And just as it seemed the nightmare was coming to an end, there becomes a need for entirely new permits to bring the cats that survived across the border because of a dangerous revelation.
The single cat had 6 cubs in her that were all about 2 weeks overdue. And so it was a recipe for disaster.
In early 2025, it came to light that these 7 lions on the site of a former roadside zoo in Quebec needed to be saved from euthanasia. Months later, just as they arrived at the newly built facility in Muskoka, 3 hours north of Toronto, a discovery. Several were pregnant.
The single cat had 6 cubs in her that were all about 2 weeks overdue. And so it was a recipe for disaster.
That female was named Kiwi, and what the surgeons found, tough to imagine.
When they went in to do emergency surgery, most of those cubs were not viable cubs. First-time mothers, inbreeding, really the cards were stacked against some of these lions. And so we're so grateful for Mango, who did survive, but her mother died during childbirth after having a litter of 6 that were overdue and emergency surgery by wildlife veterinarians to save her life. Unfortunately, it couldn't be done. And this is the sad, sad truth that happens at so much of the surplus breeding and roadside zoos. They have a 50% neonatal mortality. 50% of big cat cubs born in captivity don't make it. And you think of all the mothers that don't make it because of that.
But from tragedy came a bit of hope by way of this little cub.
Mango's named after her mother, Kiwi, who passed away. So kind of an homage to Miss Kiwi, who did not survive.
But the battle wasn't over for little Mango, and she was brought to Minnesota.
Mango's doing really well. They're monitoring her anesthesia.
So Mango needed 2 surgeries for a repaired hernia early in life. So we were able to bring her to the sanctuary first to be able to get those surgeries performed.
How did her surgery go?
It went very well.
Good.
Yep, no problems.
Meanwhile, a similar story for another pregnant female named Nirvana. But her birth story, very different, and handled by the experts at the Toronto Zoo.
I have dealt with other pregnant cats, but this was my first lion. But thankfully, we have lots of experience at the Toronto Zoo dealing with pregnant big cats. So we already had, designs for the den that we've used with tigers and cheetahs. We all just kind of turned off the lights and let her give birth in privacy, but watching her really closely on the cameras. And it was a really easy birth, immediately showing great maternal instincts.
But the addition of the 2 male cubs, Archie and Reggie, meant that travel to Turpentine Creek Wildlife Refuge in Arkansas would be delayed.
When you're transporting an endangered animal, you have to obtain a permit to do so. But that permit goes through multiple government processes, and it's time intensive.
We ended up having our permits all in order, and then had to get the permits amended in order to add those 2 male cubs on to be able to get all of them here together and keep that family together.
There they go. Yay! And you can see Nirvana's already talking to him.
In the wild, they would give birth once every 2.5 to 3 years because they raise their offspring till that age. In captivity, as soon as they pull the cubs and sell them, they go right back into estrus and they rebreed them. So they're breeding these cats maybe 1 to 2 times a year instead of 1 every 2 to 5 years in the wild. And so that causes so much genetic issues, so much stress on the cats.
According to Canadian wildlife protection charity ZooCheck, of the 150 permanent wildlife display facilities in Canada, 50% are considered roadside zoos.
I think it's hard for a lot of people because they might go to a roadside zoo and say, oh, there's a little lion in a cage, and that's what the whole story is to them. But when you're in this rescue industry, the whole story is so much more than that. It's when they get sick, when they don't get vet care, when they're not getting a proper diet, when they're fighting for food, when they're inbreeding and then they're dying during birth.
For the 9 that did survive, the final destination, the United States, and their forever homes, now on the horizon. trapped in a cold cage in the Canadian winter and in the summer displayed at a rundown roadside zoo. That's no longer the reality for these 9 lions surviving against all odds.
There we go. Whoa!
Having Mango, the cub, come here is a miracle.
She's already around the front.
Little Mango went through 2 surgeries and a spay, and she's a little ball of fire. It is sad to see a lion cub grow up by themselves because we can't put her with adults yet, because if they're not their own kin, they look at them as prey.
Oh, I'm being stalked.
Our goal is to merge her with a lion pride once she's old enough.
And right there with Mango in Minnesota, this pair.
Kim and Carl live together. Kim has a birth control implant until we can vasectomize Carl, because an interesting fact is if you neuter a male lion, he'll drop his mane. And we want him to keep as much of being a lion in captivity as he can. So he'll receive a vasectomy and she will get spayed upon springtime. At accredited sanctuaries like ours, we do not buy, breed, trade, or sell animals. So the animals will be altered or they will live independently if they're living solo in order to not breed. Our goal is to keep wild and to not have a surplus of animals living behind cages in captivity that have no conservation value.
Meanwhile, in Arkansas, a reunion between a mother and her 2 cubs.
There they go. Yay! And you can see Nirvana's already talking to him.
Well, there was tears, I can say that. It's very nerve-wracking, to first the stress of moving, the animals. We had to separate them. They could not travel together for fear that she might injure them, step on them by accident. Moving is stressful. We were prepared for anything can happen. And so to see them back together and then just trot through the habitat, it's pretty amazing.
And the 2 cubs weren't the only family to arrive.
Here's Scar. Scar's coming.
We also rescued 2 males, Scar and Mufasa, who are actually Nirvana's brothers.
Okay, I'll take 3 steps back. That's your place. All right, so first was Mufasa.
Finally, the 9th lion, a lone male.
Thor, who's a white, beautifully blonde male lion who's 7 years old. And this is his 4th or 5th home. So he's never had permanent home. I'm sure he was used for cub petting or photo ops, early on in his age. But this is finally his forever home. We're one of 10 globally accredited sanctuaries in North America. So that's the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries. And so we give guided educational tours where people can come and see these animals. And Nirvana, Scar, Mufasa, Thor, and the cubs' names are Reggie and Archie.
They shouldn't be living behind a fence. They should not have been sitting there in those conditions. And they're still behind a fence here. It might be a huge fence. But yeah, we got to prevent more cats from needing sanctuary in the first place.
Ever since the Big Cat and Public Safety Act passed in the United States, we've been working with the government agencies on a lot of these shutdowns of some of these bad places that have been open to the public and allowed cub petting and things like that.
Oh, they're so cute. Nice.
These lions will live the rest of their lives in as good conditions as we can possibly provide in captivity in sanctuaries that will provide the veterinary care, the nutrition, the love and attention that they need to live wonderful lives. But the reality is, for so many more animals in roadside zoos across this country, they wait minute after minute, day after day for rescue that doesn't come.
What needs to change? Animal rights groups call for stricter regulations, mandatory inspections, and ultimately, stronger provincial and federal laws. The real cost of some roadside zoos in Canada is far more than the price of admission.
There's no regulations and no license required to set up a zoo.
Problematic conditions and questionable safety in roadside zoos.
It's a disturbing image captured by animal activists alleging widespread abuse.
Advocates say animals are falling through the cracks.
I've seen monkeys plucking out their own hairs because of psychological distress.
According to animal welfare nonprofit World Animal Protection, Ontario ranks last among Canadian provinces to address captive wildlife issues like roadside zoos.
You can keep a giraffe in your backyard in Ontario.
Anyone in Ontario can open and operate a zoo. That's according to the team from Animal Justice, an animal law advocacy group, and it's been fighting for change on all levels of government.
Let's start with some of the obvious candidates like elephants and great apes such as chimpanzees and orangutans, and exotic big cats as well, lions and tigers, animals that don't occur naturally in Canada. Our climate is very, very difficult for them, and they're also quite intelligent and self-aware creatures. So let's end the captivity of those animals in Canada.
CTV News reached out to the province to ask if it would consider strengthening laws pertaining to roadside zoos. A spokesperson said Ontario was proud to have the strongest animal protections in the country, while the Solicitor General's office declined to comment specifically, steering us towards provincial laws which prohibit causing or permitting distress to any animal. On the federal level, the Senate passed a bill in December of 2024, a trimmed-down version of the Jane Goodall Act.
The greeting call of the chimpanzee. Me, Jane.
That was going to prohibit the captivity of great apes and elephants, and the Senate had recommended that big cats be included in that bill as well.
Unfortunately, S15 died on the order paper when Parliament was prorogued. We desperately need to get that bill back in front of Parliament, ensure it passes.
I was honored to call Jane my friend, and her passing at 91 years old is a loss to the world. And I really think we'll work that much harder because it's a legacy for Jane Goodall that Canada accept this legislation, pass it quickly.
We've been to Canada over 7 times to rescue 23 wildcats because there is not a lot of strict laws about private ownership, captive breeding, and roadside zoos.
And even the sanctuaries in the States are saying we've had to come up to Canada multiple times to clean up this mess.
Advocates argue that until something is signed into law and enforced,
the animals are being used for money. Make sure that sanctuary is accredited and doing the right thing for the animals.
In a roadside zoo, the number one goal is profit and always will be. And that profit always comes at the expense of the animals.
A stark reminder from those who work with these animals. This story, far too common.
Thank you for making that incredible ending for these lions, the beginning of a bigger story.